Hey everyone, I'm Patrick. Welcome to the podcast. Today, super excited to have Monica Stewart on. Interestingly enough, Monica, your name has come up a few times in the past 1 or 2 years. So, what I've heard, you have very interesting and super insightful perspective to share. So, I'm excited for our conversation. Excited that we have you on. For people who don't know you, I think your experience in the go-to-market space speaks for itself. You spent 10 plus year in quota carrying roles from AEs to CRO. Interestingly, with a wide range of organization from very established companies like S&B Market Intelligence to higher growth, smaller companies like Trello. You then worked at Scaled, kind of leading revenue transformation projects. And now you, for what, more than 5, 6 years,
hmm
you've started MSP consulting, helping founders and sales team scale faster. So Monica, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you for the intro, Patrick, and it's really nice to be here. I'm doing great, and yeah, thanks for the note on my experience. I think when I hear people say like, "Oh, you need industry experience to be able to sell something," I think that I'm a really good example of the counterpoint of that. I've sold to everybody from you know procurement and supply chain managers at Fortune 500 companies to like small multifamily real estate investors. One quick note: I built the enterprise team at a company that was acquired by S&P. So I never
Okay.
worked at S&P. And I think that's another thing that's interesting is that like I've never worked at an organization with more than 100 employees. My entire career is literally like helping um, startups, mostly around Series A, Series B stage, sell to some of the biggest companies in the world.
That's awesome. One, so I'm a bit have a similar professional background, being a jack of all trade,
Yeah.
touch a bunch of different industries, a bunch of different roles, and I think there's something to be said about having variety of experience as well. In some industries, you need to have like deep subject matter expertise because you need to know the product inside out, or you need to understand the industry inside out, etc. But I think that by having the ability to touch to a number of different industries, I think you can bring different perspectives to kind of
hmm
any new role. And I think there are things that you learn selling SaaS that when you sell cybersecurity or you sell medical devices, for example, you know, might not be 100% applicable, but might help you to do a better job or innovate in your ways of working. So that's
I've also
um,
sold cybersecurity actually.
okay. That's
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I feel like the divide is it's the sales motion and it's the
Yeah,
buyer. And
yeah.
so I've certainly learned a lot from having like I've sold multiple things to the same companies because there are
Mm,
some companies that are just really big buyers and they also tend to adopt new technologies a little bit faster. Like Walmart is
yeah,
one of them, Travelers Insurance is one of them.
yeah.
There's like a couple in every vertical that are like you're like, "Oh yeah, of course you guys are selling to those guys." Like they're always kind of on top of what's new in the market. And
Yeah.
I feel like the truth that you really get to after coming at things from those different perspectives is you understand that like large organizations really do have an organizational personality, and it's
Mm,
really a lot more about understanding like not only who your buyer is in terms of the people that you're selling to, but like the character and like the way that people behave within that company and kind of how they make decisions as a group.
I like that. That's awesome. So maybe as a starting point, I always like to ask that question. Tell us about what initially got you started into sales. We People like to say that no one studied to go into sales and kind of fell into it and
Yeah.
kept on going. So what's your story and what I guess kept you on going for, the years afterwards?
But they do now, right? Like now you can study
Hmm.
sales in school, which I
Yeah.
think is
Yeah, that's true.
awesome. Um, it's funny, I've yet to meet someone that's like, yeah, I graduated with a degree in sales, but I know that they're teaching it now. So
It's happening in the next few years. I think there's going to be more of that now that there's a structured program for
we're
sure.
going to start seeing it. Yeah, definitely. But as you said, it is something that you can come at from a lot of different angles. I studied political science and international relations, which is a great degree for sales because
Mhm.
all you do is you learn history and then you create your own narrative around it, and then your grade is dependent on how well you can defend your narrative. There are some things that are like factually wrong, but there's a million different ways that you can interpret like what happened. And so as long as you're able to convince your teacher and convince the class, then you do well. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally what sales is building a narrative and kind of getting everybody on the same page with you around what that narrative is.
Yeah.
And I just really loved that. And I think when I was going into the workforce, I saw sales as the thing that would kind of give me the most creativity.
Mm.
There were not, I went to like Brooklyn College. I didn't graduate from a big school and I only did undergrad. And so there, I was like, okay, what can I do that is literally not being an executive assistant, which was like most of the jobs that I was getting pushed into were that. And I was just like,
Yeah.
that's not how I'm going to end up with any kind of career that's going to be satisfying to me. And
Yeah.
so I took an entry level sales job at a conference company that, interestingly enough, was producing uh, institutional investment conferences for like some of the biggest institutional investors in the world, like super big pension funds and corporate funds, mostly European, which is where most of the big institutional investors are.
Yeah.
And so it actually ended up being like really interesting. I learned everything about how like hedge funds and private equity works. And, I got to meet all of these like really fascinating, really accomplished, really smart people that were my clients. And
It's
so
like
it was
great.
like
It's great.
10 out
It's
of 10.
great exposure to yeah. It's great exposure to start with because I mean, institutional investors. It's you're touching a number of different industries and you're
Mhm.
surrounded with like very smart and driven people. So that's a great place to start. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and it also taught me to have like no fear because I made 100
Mm.
cold calls every day, starting at 7 a.m. because of the time difference.
Mm.
And the people that I was talking to, I had like nothing in common with them. I was like 22, they're like 50, 60 years old. They manage trillions of euros.
Suits
They
and
went to like
tie.
London School of Economics. So there was no like, oh, Friday, am I right? Ha ha ha. Like, or like they're like, what is this about? I want to have a very high level discussion. And I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't study economics. Like I was like Googling all of these different terms, like,
Yeah.
what is a quant fund and all of that.
Yeah.
But they're like, I wasn't going to impress them with my industry knowledge ever at any point. And so it
Yeah.
really was about like, how do you just learn how to talk to people and be interested instead of being interesting, and
Hmm.
just like try to figure out how to make a connection and provide some sort of value based on that.
That's great. And now, obviously, a few years later, deep into founder and kind of scaling up revenue organization. Um, Maybe tell us a bit more about the type of work that you do at MSP Consulting. What are the typical type of companies that you work with, or like what are the challenges they're facing, and how do you think, or why do you think that focusing on early stage startups growing their revenue team is more interesting than helping much larger, much more established sales organizations?
Well, so I mean, the first reason is that is the thing that I'm really good at,
Yeah,
and that's where I can
yeah,
provide the most value. When I was at
yeah,
Scaled, we did do. I mean, I have worked with large organizations. I did, global sales training for LinkedIn and Microsoft, and even like larger startups like Figma.
yeah.
But when you're working with a company like that, you're like you're coming in like one small part of a project that they have, and you're supporting their internal team. Um, so like with LinkedIn, we designed their like sales competencies and like global sales training program, but it was also in very close partnership with their enablement team.
Mm.
And so it's like a different kind of way of working. And I feel like I want to have integrity in my work. And so I don't want to build a business where I'm like, yeah, I could probably do that. Like, let me take that on. I'll figure it out, because
Yeah,
I know that there's somebody else that like wouldn't have to be figuring it out as they go along. And this
yeah,
is like actually their zone of genius. And I think that they should probably
yeah.
work on that project, and I should probably work on the thing that is my zone of
You're great
genius.
at it.
And
Yeah,
like, I would say the same thing for uh, you know, startups hiring people that have only had experiences in big companies. They're going to have to come in and like kind of figure a bunch of stuff out as they go along. And it's like, it's 2025. You have access to like the widest range of expertise that anyone has ever had in
yeah,
the world. Like, why would you do that? So I
yeah,
think that's one thing, is just from a kind of like finding product market fit for myself perspective.
yeah,
Like that is where I can provide the most value. And
yeah.
then I think the other part is that I I really just love working with founders. Like I think that they're a very special breed, and the people that I work with are not truly early stage. They have at least,
Some
a million
some
plus in
traction.
revenue. And so they have product market fit. And, their company's been around for 3 or 5 years, and they've been usually through a couple of iterations of what sales looks like for them. And um, if they've done that, they're already in like the 94th percentile, like they've
Yeah.
already made it past like so many of the hurdles that most people don't get past, including even making the decision to commit and start the thing. Um,
Yeah.
and the way that I see it is like, because of my experience, I just happen to have this knowledge that can like help them at that point in their journey. And so I want to share that.
Yeah. Cool. And you mentioned a few time, product market fit. By the way, there's so many things we could discuss in your statement about like finding your personal product market fit as an individual, but also as a company.
Yeah.
So it seems like post product market fit are type of companies that you focus on, one
Mhm.
plus $1 million in ARR. What is your, maybe that's a controversial question, but what is your definition of product market fit? Is it purely revenue based, or is there some other indicators that you kind of look for before deciding whether or not you can help or you want to help a specific organization?
It's not purely revenue based, and actually, I do have a couple of companies that are, because of the nature of their product,
Yeah,
their deal sizes are incredibly large,
yeah,
and so they can get to like over 1 million with like infinitesimally
to
smaller
do.
number of
Yeah,
customers than like
yeah,
typical mid market enterprise SaaS. Um,
yeah,
and so with that, we're just in alignment that like their stage of go to market maturity doesn't necessarily match like the old school like SaaS
yeah,
benchmarks,
yeah.
and that's fine. It's just kind of approaching it from a different perspective. But I would say that what are the things that I look for? I look for some sort of a repeatable top of funnel channel.
Mm.
So like, and can you tell me who your customer is? So first of all, can you describe to me who your like who buys your product and why, with some degree of specificity? And then can you tell me how those people find you? um, and it doesn't have to be like super, super
Yeah.
intense, but
Hurried out. Yeah,
you need to be at that point doing some sort of like, you have a referral motion that's repeatable, or like what conferences you can go to find customers, or even what podcasts your market is listening to. Like it can't all
yeah,
just be like, I don't know, super random. And then
yeah,
I also look for like adoption and retention, and I think that's really
yeah.
the biggest metric.
Okay, cool. So now let's focus maybe on the transition that these organizations that are post product market fit and that are looking to scale their revenue. What do you think are maybe the main challenges that they're facing or that they're struggling with as they're going through that transition?
Hmm. So I mean, we can kind of break those challenges down into a couple of different categories, but I would say at the highest level, the biggest thing that they struggle with is a mindset
Mm.
shift. So people tend to think that there's like these gates, and it's like product market fit, go to market fit, scale. I cannot speak to the product market fit side as much because I'm not a product manager,
Yeah,
but I know that at least on the go to market side, it's not like, oh, I've hit GTM fit, check, ready to scale. The scale happens like you hit GTM fit around the $1 to $3 million mark, right?
yeah,
But you don't really hit true GTM fit until you've got a team of people that you have onboarded and have retained, and they are hitting their goals. And it's kind of like if you think about your sales team as your users and your
yeah,
go to market as the product,
yeah,
you need to have like a core group of users who are like using the process and finding success with it,
mm,
and you're retaining them on your team. That's
yeah,
how you know that you have go to market fit. And there's obviously a gap in between those two stages, because the
mm,
1 to 3 million, it's like usually mostly founder led sales, or maybe there's like one person on their team. And then they have to go through the trial and error of like, okay, how do I actually like get this to work for other
mm,
people, which is going to be your sales team. And I think that, most founders kind of like mentally just sort of skip that step. They're
Mm.
like, okay, great. I have something that has been working for me. Hire people, they do that same thing, and then profit.
That's
Um,
gonna work. Is gonna magically,
yeah.
the new AE you're gonna bring on is gonna magically know exactly what to do and gonna bring us to new heights. Okay, interesting.
And yeah, not only that, like, oh, the thing that I did, they're also going to be able to execute
Mm,
with the same degree of like success, which is also probably not really the case.
mm. Okay, so it's like it's founder mindset specifically, right? So how
Yeah.
they are approaching how they're seeing go to market team members, or who do they need, what do they need to succeed, and how
Yeah,
much
how do
can
they
they
need to
actually bring
support those people? Also, like, their own involvement.
in?
Um, what I see with companies that sell to, like, that are doing like a truly complex enterprise sale is that like the founder will kind of step out too early. Like they're like, oh, I'm still helping, I'm still running my own deals, I'm still very involved in sales, but they're not like actively supporting 80% of their deals. And like you really should be, like as long as you can. Like
Yeah.
it should be to the point where your salespeople are like get the fuck off my call, like I don't
Yeah.
need you, like I've got this, and you're like, are you sure I can help? Like that's
Yeah.
that's kind of like the level of involvement that you should be aiming for. And I find that most founders are like the total opposite of that. They're like, and I get it, right? Because
Mhm.
they had to wear this hat and they had to create this job for themselves, and they're like, I can't wait to be able to get back into other jobs and like work on other parts of my business that really need help.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not a sales native founder. Like I do work with a good percentage of founders that come from the business side,
Yeah.
but a lot of them come from the industry that they sell to, or they come from like product background.
Yeah.
And so, they're not wrong. Like there are other parts of their company that also need their attention. But, I'm here to advocate for the sales part, which also
Yeah.
needs their attention.
I think that's fair, right? It's for many more technical oriented founders, it's always it can feel like a chore to sell,
Yeah.
right? It's like it's not natural
It
to
is. It's
them,
hard.
and then on top of that, it's hard, and they've tried for so long to bring in new clients, and every single one of them it's tough. And then the second they have someone who's good at it, they're like, okay, cool, now you do it. So I think that
Yeah.
is, but I think from what's interesting from again from a technical founder perspective, not doing as much sales actually distances you from the market. And I
Very
think
true.
that even when you're past the $1-3 million AR, your product will continue to evolve. So having
Hmm.
your ear close to the ground, so to speak, and being to talk to prospects, to clients, to in renewal conversation, being involved there, I think really gives you an insightful perspective on like, okay, well, as a business as a whole, right? Are we doing the right things, both from a go to market perspective, but from a product and engineering perspective as well? So
Yeah.
that's super interesting. So number one, founder kind of mindset shift. They're kind of either leaving too early, being actively involved, or they're not actually enabling their team correctly to be successful. That's number one.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I would say number two is like being actively engaged and willing to like continue to change your whole GTM motion.
Mm,
So, for example, like people will be like, "Oh, well, have this sequence that I sent out, and that's how we got all of our first customers. I
yeah.
don't understand why, the team changed it, and maybe that's why they're not being successful right now. We should go back to doing this like I did it before. It worked really great."
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that was 2 years ago, and like email isn't hitting the primary inbox anymore. So like
Yeah.
even if it was like an amazing sequence, which like candidly it probably wasn't,
Yeah.
but it's
More likely than not, it was shit.
yeah, and like I mean, it was like probably like fine, but like
Yeah.
sure you got some results with it for the same reason that like all of the like outsourced BDR companies and AI SDR companies get results at first. Like you'll get some people to say yes, but then like are you going to continue to get people to say yes? No, you hit a point of diminishing returns with
Yeah.
that strategy. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a sequence. It could be like
Yeah.
whatever they did, to
Yeah.
get their first customers. You can't keep pressing the same button in GTM for very long, especially now, and
Mhm.
get like the same results. You have to constantly be reinventing and trying new channels and trying new approaches and trying new tools, like the I call it like the lavender email framework from like 2 years ago that they
Mhm.
were really pushing. That's like, have an unsure tone and like blah, 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 blah. Like now I get the most trash outreach follows that same pattern. And this is like, I'm not an expert in top of funnel, but I touch it enough. Like you have to. And it's like one thing that I know for sure is that anything in sales or like out top of funnel that is working, like we people will ruin it because in sales we can't have nice things. Like the minute that like something starts to work, it's gonna be like overrun by people just doing shitty outreach, and then that tactic will stop working because people have seen it before. So you constantly have to be going back to the drawing board, and I would say it's like you should be looking at all of your different campaigns minimum once a month. Like if you're a company, you're probably not doing the volume that would necessitate looking at it like weekly or something like that, but at least monthly, like really having an honest conversation with yourself about like, do these conversion numbers and the volume that we're doing, does this get us to our goals? And usually the answer is to improve your conversion, not to raise the volume for multiple reasons. So I would say, you have to not only be more involved than you're probably going to want to be, you're also going to have to like continue to change your tactics, because it's not like we have this playbook, just go execute
Yeah.
it.
I think a lot of early stage organization are going to take the easy route of like adding volume. Obviously,
Yes.
pod for a product, we're really, really focused on like mid funnel conversion. And I think that
Uh-huh.
the mindset I see a lot of organizations like, okay, well, we have a top of the funnel problem. We just need to add more leads. And when we actually look at the numbers, we're like, well, you're leaving, 50% of your leads, untouched for 2 weeks, and you're
Yeah.
not enabling your reps to do a good job at actually moving them from
Yeah.
stage to stage. Like it's basically taking your money and like burning it instead of actually making
Mhm.
every one of those dollars that you spent on qualifying a lead or finding a lead go to waste. So I think that's
Yeah,
super interesting.
that's super true. And it's a virtuous flywheel. So if you're getting really good at conversion,
Yeah.
then you're naturally going to get better at top of funnel, because you're actually getting the information that you need in customer conversations to
Yeah.
identify which signals are meaningful and which ones are not.
Yeah.
And then you can like feed that back into your top of funnel outreach. And I find that people tend to sort of like um handicap themselves on both sides. They don't put enough thought and effort into their top of funnel, because I mean, dude, it's a fucking grind. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's
hard.
tough.
It's
It's
really
tough.
hard and mostly unrewarding. Like
Yeah.
at best you're getting like what, you know, 5 to 10% conversion if you're doing like a really killer job and you've
Yeah.
got great brand recognition. So it's tough, but you have to do it. But then they also tend to hurt themselves on the like lead to op conversion side, because they don't spend enough time in discovery, and they're not actually capturing information that they need to learn more about their market.
Yeah, I think some of the when you're from 0 to 1 million, I think the founders and their grit, their passion,
Yeah.
their ability to articulate the value prop can actually get to sales and results in the middle of the funnel. I don't want to say easily, but like not in a standard way. And the second you bring another party in, like another account executive or business development manager in, like they don't have the same passion or the same understanding of the product and the market, etc. So I think this
Yeah.
is where it falls apart. So maybe on that, I want to go back to your second comment about, or your second kind of mistake or common um, struggle and challenge that startups face around not kind of evolving fast enough. What is the way to overcome that? Is it just a mindset problem again, a bit like the first one, or is it not having the proper processes, not having the right success criteria, right? If you expect X metric from from your top of funnel or whatever part of your funnel, it's obviously much easier to know whether it's doing a good job or not, or if you're getting to a point of diminishing return. So what do you see as being tactical ways where organization can or founders can overcome those challenges when they're past product market
Um,
fit?
I think that it's a couple of different things. It is, like I said before, just kind of accepting that you're going to have to
Yeah.
stay with that part of the business
Yeah.
and be more, you know, put more thought into the strategy around it than
Yeah.
you were hoping or expecting.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's a certain level of recognizing that there is like an art and a science to sales, and if it's not your background, and even if it is your background, like sometimes I have founders who are like, they're like, yeah, I was a sales manager for like 15 years, or like I actually worked with a founder who was an AE before he started his company, but he still hired me because
Yeah.
he understood that like there were some things that he knew and then there were some things that he didn't know how to do,
Yeah.
like for example build a customer success team. So I think what I love is when, I talk to a founder and they're like, so I've been doing this and I've read all the books and I listened to a bunch of podcasts and I think I kind of like get what this is, but I also recognize that there's like this other thing that I don't know just because I actually haven't like done that at
Done
that
it.
level before. And that's why I want to work with you, because I know that you have. And so I think that that's the other part of it. And sales is like a weird function in a company from that perspective, because anyone can like technically do it. And I wonder now if people that are peers to me but are in functions like product or engineering are now starting to get sort of the same thing because of vibe coding, and there's like
I
this
think so.
like barrier to entry for other parts of the organization that have now been lowered, but
Yeah.
that's never existed for sales. It's like, do you have a phone? Do you have email? Can you go to a
Do you
conference?
have a mouth?
Regardless, like, you're doing, yeah, you're doing sales, you talk to people and say
Yeah.
things. um, but there's obviously a lot more levels to it. It's
Yeah.
like, what do they say about like skiing and snowboarding?
Yeah.
Like skiing is harder to learn but easier to get really good at, and snowboarding is like easier
To
to
learn, but
learn
yeah,
and to get
exactly.
really good at. It's like snowboarding.
Yeah, I think that sales for me, everyone can, and same thing for marketing. I would put marketing in the same bucket. Like it's easy to do
Yeah,
to do a LinkedIn post, or it's easy to
right.
like take a picture or do an ad. It's easy, but but I think that it is tough to do it is tough to do a good one, and it is
Hmm.
impossible to do an incredible one. So I think but it's just like people's perspectives, like, oh, it's easy, I can do that. But when you start
Yeah,
getting into the gist of it, like you realize there's a lot, to your point, there's a lot more nuances into what makes for a great sales motion or a great, marketing campaign. Um,
yeah.
so I love those two kind of struggles and challenges. Um, do you see those happening, let's call it from the $1 to $10 million ARR mark for a company, or does it, even does organizations struggle with these even past 10 million and all the way up
Oh
to
yeah,
100 and $500 million ARR?
for sure. I mean, like I said, I haven't worked in
Yeah.
those organizations as
Yeah.
much. I mean, when I was at Trello, uh we had a we were trending towards like 100 million,
Yeah.
but it was a PLG company.
Yeah.
So like the
Different.
majority, it was like most of that revenue wasn't coming from sales. So the
Yeah.
sales team was in a very different stage of
Yeah.
maturity, closer to like a Series B company, I would say. Um, but I mean, yeah, for sure. Like that's why like I have also done this work with like publicly traded companies and
Yeah.
Fortune 500 companies, because their market changes, right? Like
Yeah.
they are continuing on their ship, and their ship is going in a constant direction, but the water around them and the environment is
Yeah.
shifting, and then that requires new things. So
Yeah.
it could be like your industry is starting, your customers are starting to be bitten off by a bunch of, used to be
Okay.
like, oh, that's so cute, you guys are a little HR tech startup, but now it's like, oh, those HR tech startups are like, 50 million, 100 million, like they're like, some of them are IPOing, like they're
Yeah.
not little companies anymore, they're like solid mid-sized companies that have thousands of customers, and those are your customers, and they now have professional sales teams that are trying to go and get those expansions and like continue to take away more and more of your business.
Yeah.
And so I think what I see with larger companies is that they become like, they can coast for a really long time
Yeah.
on their brand recognition and the existing customer relationships that they have. I see this coming in, working with startups that are trying to disrupt these larger incumbents
Yeah.
across all industries in the customer organizations. And it's like, I know that we're not only up against that product, which is usually inferior,
Yeah.
but we're also up against status quo. We're up against people who feel very comfortable using it, who have it integrated into their workflow. And we're also up against the salesperson that's
Yeah.
been working with the team that we're selling to for like 8 years,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
that just that relationship in and of itself, and like the level of comfort is like really
Super
difficult to go
valuable.
up against.
Yeah.
That being said, so all of those things are helping them to keep their customer base. And if you look at those like mature organizations, a lot of their revenue comes from their existing customers.
Yeah.
And so then that allows them to get away with sales practices that are candidly like super outdated and
Outdated.
like pretty bad. So like I love when people like, and I see like my founders like get these ideas. Sometimes they're like, oh well, we had this advisor that worked at Oracle, and like the way that they do it is when they give a proposal, they automatically put all these discounts on there, so people feel like they're already getting a good deal. And I'm like,
No. No.
that's not how that works. You guys
2010,
should be
2010 is calling. They want their sales tactic back.
2010 is calling. It back. So it's like they can get away with a lot of like pretty bad practices,
Yeah.
because
They have the big
they're
name
just
recognition. Yeah.
they're falling behind.
Yeah.
And so they definitely do need help for sure. And I think it's like the same thing in the sales teams in those companies as you see in other departments, where they realize that they need to transform and innovate, and it's like a huge uphill battle for them
Yeah.
to do so.
I mean, it's always the analogy between a cruise ship
Yeah.
of a enterprise size organization that it's like super tough to move around. And first is a pirate ship that is a startup, and there's
Mhm.
an article from a very famous venture capitalist that talks about how can you as your organization as a startup or a growing company to stay a pirate ship as quickly as possible. Because I think the biggest difference or the biggest disadvantage of an established company is when the to continue on the boat analogy, when
Yeah.
the water becomes kind of muddy or becomes a bit, there's a storm coming, then the cruise ship cannot do anything about it. It might sink,
Right.
whereas the pirate ship can actually be a lot more nimble and on on all parts of its organization, from go to market to product, R&D, customer success, etc. So I think that's super interesting. So if you let's take the example, if you're going into a client, let's say a $5 million ARR, looking to triple, double in the next 4 5 years or 4 5 years, what would you say are the number one, the top three things that you want to establish or you want to implement in these companies to make sure that they're, I don't want to say future proof, but they have a strong foundation to be able to grow from? What are some of these things that you think are no brainers that all founders should be doing past that PMF stage?
I think that you should be updating your notion of PMF,
Mm-hmm.
like at least twice a year,
Yeah.
probably. Because that's like when you hit initial stage of PMF, you have the MVP version of PMF, to
Yeah.
use more acronyms. Like you have
Mm-hmm.
like you've crossed like the barrier of information that you need in order to
Yeah.
be able to have like some conviction in what you're doing. But it's not like that is done.
Yeah.
And so like most of my clients at some point in our work together, we go through a process of now like going back through their customer base and looking at like who are the people who have the highest LTV, now that you have a reasonable measure of LTV,
Yeah.
and then looking at like what are the factors of those companies, and then going back and like refining our idea of qualification and top of funnel based on that. So I would say like definitely build that into your plan. And then also like you need to you need to have a vision for like how you're going to operate as a sales manager. Um, that's another job that you need to learn. Congratulations, because like
You've been
your
promoted.
team, yeah, your team is going to need support from you. And like it's not because they don't know how to do their job, but it's that part of their job requires them having a manager,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't care how independent they say they were, or like how many early stage companies they've worked at where they're like, yeah, I went in and I built the thing and I figured it out. Like, if you are an individual contributor and like that's been your job history, you might have been an individual contributor with not a lot of resources, but the more
Yeah.
resources you give that person, the more successful they're going to be.
Yeah. What do you so would you say, would you recommend founders, they probably, to your point, hired an individual AE or one person to help them on the sales side. Who do you think they should hire next? Is it like more individual contributors, to your point, and then you as a founder are becoming a bit of a sales manager, or do you think you should hire somewhat of a more experienced sales leader, maybe like a director of sales or VP of sales, and then add more people below them? What's the right, if there is such a thing as a
Yeah.
right approach, what's the right approach here from a hiring side?
The approach that I recommend that I've seen work the best is like you continue to add individual contributors until you get to like 4 to 5.
Yeah.
And then you layer in a sales leader on top of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's hard to know, like, if you hire a sales leader, the first thing that they're going to want to do is like hire more people.
Yeah.
And then that is like a forced growth that's really expensive.
Yeah.
Because you just hired someone expensive that's then going to want to hire more people.
Yeah.
And I worry about like being able to grow demand enough
Yeah.
to support that team.
Yeah. I like I think a lot of the things that you've mentioned so far are oriented around kind of both mindset, culture, people, because I agree with you. I think that's the foundation of that shift, to go from one person to almost do it all, to then having a team that can, support that growth. If you were to think about either processes oriented initiatives or technology or tools or other angles that aren't necessarily people or mindset, what do you think might be the biggest enabler to get on a trajectory to 10 $50 million ARR from the 1 to $5 million ARR?
I think that having a really good conversational intelligence tool
Mm-hmm.
is super, super, super important. And I really recommend getting one that is purpose built for sales.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of vertical AI models, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, you could take your transcripts out of like whatever you're using that you started using,
Yeah.
not for your sales team, but just when you started your company, and you could like throw those transcripts into like one of the big LLMs, but like, no,
Yeah.
that's only going to be as good as the context that you give it. And so I think
Yeah.
it's better if you have something that has really good integrations with your CRM and has, you know, um, a, a model that is like specifically designed for sales so that you don't have to do as much of that training work.
Yeah.
The amount, like the insights and the coaching that you can get from that, if you know how to ask the right questions, is just
Yeah.
like a massive unlock.
Yeah.
So, and also don't buy Gong because their AI fucking sucks. But like, they
Hot take.
usually,
I agree.
you can put that on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I really like Sybil and Avoma. I'm sure that there's a couple
Yeah.
of other ones, but like, don't use your team's Copilot, whatever. Don't use like
Yeah.
Fireflies. Don't use Otter AI. Like, use something for your sales
For
team.
sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think that's a big, obviously, part of what we do at Pod is like we integrate with some of the conversational intelligence tool. And I think that
Mhm.
the biggest difference that I see between organization who have that mindset that you mentioned, which is like, oh, I'll just like pull the transcript from Zoom directly and then throw it into a custom
Oh,
GPT, is that I think you end up saving time in, I'll call it, low value admin work, like writing an email and stuff like that. But I think that when it comes to leveraging these transcripts or these conversations to help enable the team to make better decisions or actually understand what to do next, or how does it fit into your sales processes, I think it falls short, because ultimately it's not just about looking at
yeah,
one call and like using an LLM to summarize it, but actually deriving meaning from it, or like
correct.
deriving best
Yeah.
practices, and not just looking at one transcript, but actually looking at all your discussions with that person, and then your
Yeah.
email threads, and then your notes, and like all of that together adds a lot more dimension that ends up being more helpful for the rep, instead of just having like
Or
a
like the
few.
patterns that are coming up across conversations with multiple companies or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, Monica, this was great. Really enjoyed the conversation. Let's
Thank you.
transition into our rapid fire kind of closing session. The first question is, if you have one piece of advice you'd wish someone had given to you when you first started in sales, what would it be?
Oh, well, I have a really good piece of advice that someone gave me when I first started in sales,
Cool.
which I would share with everybody, which is don't try to impress anyone.
I love that.
And this was, this is going back to that first job that I had, and the rest of the quote was, "Don't try to impress anyone because you can't. Just just see who you can make a connection with."
Yeah.
And like it's like I'd say number one thing that I coach people on in any type of customer call is ask more questions.
Mm. Active
And
listening. Yeah.
if you're not trying to impress anybody, naturally what you're going to do is you're going to ask more questions because you're not thinking about what you're going to say
Yeah.
to like show your industry knowledge or sound smart or like show how your product can help them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one of the in my professional journey, one of the quotes, it was actually from Barack Obama, who changed completely my approach to either sales or when I was in consulting. I think he said something like, "Don't listen to answer, listen to understand." And
Mm,
once you do that, like the follow-up questions will come from a much more genuine place, as opposed
yeah.
to like you listen to the first few words and you're like, okay, what should I ask next? And you don't actually
Yeah.
actively listen to what that person is trying to say or their meaning or their expression, etc. I think that's a as you think about if you're in a role of consultative selling, or even if you're just starting in sales, like just listen to understand, and naturally you'll know how to push the conversation forward. It obviously comes with time, but I think that a lot of younger sellers or younger professional, generally speaking, they want so bad to ask the right question. They want to look so good and they want to like impress, and at the end of the day that pressure ends up being counterproductive for them. So okay, cool.
100%. Yeah.
um Now, rapid fire questions. Answer just with a few words. The first thing that comes top of mind, or we can skip, obviously. Number
Okay.
one, what is your favorite sales methodology framework? And I will add specifically for high growth sales organizations.
Okay, this is a controversial one, and it's controversial for me too because it's something that I've done a total 180 on. But honestly, Medic, like I think that Medic remains undefeated, and I want to
Yeah,
qualify this by saying that Medic is a qualification framework. It is not a discovery framework.
yeah,
You should not use it as a discovery call like structure.
methodology. Yeah,
But behind the scenes as a qualification framework, it just gives you everything that you need. And it separates like the real deals from the non-real deals faster than anything that I've seen.
beautiful. What do you see? What is one sales popular belief? And I put it in quotation, popular belief that you actually hate or completely disagree with.
Oh, there's so many. I would say two things. I would say, okay, actually, if I'm going to pick one, I'm going to say this notion that we need to sell by finding and amplifying pain. It is
Okay.
super, super, super outdated. It assumes a level of information asymmetry
Mm,
that just doesn't exist anymore
yeah.
on the part of our buyers. And also, I'm speaking specifically as somebody who helps startups sell to the biggest companies in the world. And so this usually involves some sort of a transformation in the way that they work and the way that they think about their own business.
Yeah.
And you are not going to win by making people feel really bad about what they're
About
doing.
themselves. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's
Like,
going to backfire.
this is their job. Like, like you're not going to win by talking shit about the competitor that's in there. And
Yeah.
they're like, but Patrick has been my CSM
Yeah.
at Salesforce for like 8 years. And Patrick is a good guy. He
Yeah.
really helps us,
Yeah.
like no one wants, nobody's trying to hear that. And they are sophisticated and like they have reasons why they did what they did. And like if you've never worked at JP Morgan Chase, you can't tell them why what they're doing
Yeah.
doesn't make sense, because it does make sense to them. That's why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so I think a better reframe is like, hey, this worked for you, like this was great for where you were and like what got you to where you are now, but where you're going is now different, and
Yeah.
so you need something different for where you want to be in the future.
Yeah. One thing that I'll link my first question about sales methodology to this one. One framework that I've grown to like a lot is Spiced from
Yeah.
Winning by Design, and the main reason why is I think is the C is a critical event.
Mhm.
So like rather than
Mhm.
trying to harp on the pains, like let's understand what is actually changing in your organization. To your point, like
Yeah.
are you changing direction? Why are things, why is the goalpost moving? And I think that helps to really contextualize your solution or your services to their needs in a lot more of a collaborative way, as opposed to your point, you're facing 25-year experience executives and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm going to come in and tell you how to do your job. And I think
Yeah.
that's,
Have you
yeah, I
guys
think
heard
that's,
about AI? Like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Have you,
It's an interesting point because I use the urgency in medic in
yeah,
the same way, but I think that people
yes.
really misunderstand like urgency.
What is it? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, Two last questions on the rapid fire session. What do you see as one of the most undervalued skill in sales? Not for a seller that is starting, but perhaps a seller that is later on in their career.
Storytelling.
Hmm?
Hmm.
Okay,
So,
beautiful.
like one of the things that like is super important in like enterprise sales is to have a really good, kind of like an ROI story, right?
Yeah,
And so I think where people go wrong with this is they're like, we have gone and we have created this, like we made all these numbers for you, and according to our own calculations, like you're going to make $500,000 out of spending 150,000 on like
yeah.
our solution, and it's a no-brainer for you, and you're so stupid if you don't buy this. Like the ROI is so clear. But what it really like what you really have to do is you have to start with where they're at, and you need to be able to tell a compelling story about like, here's the point where we met you, and
Yeah,
here's what your path looks like, and here are the tools that you're going to need on this path, and then this is how we're going to provide you those tools.
yeah.
And then you put like, the metrics behind it and all of that, but
It's kind of
it's
supporting
really story.
evidence to your story, but not the story in and of
Correct.
itself. I think the reason why I think storytelling is so powerful is it helps you as a seller to like actually
Mm-hmm.
understand what's going on and kind of leave no stone unturned. But I think in many cases, the buyers aren't fully grasping their own story. And I think being
Yeah.
able to play it back to them and say, like, hey, this is what I'm seeing that is happening. Am I wrong? And in many
Yeah.
cases, you're like, oh, yeah, actually, I think articulated that way, like I actually understand better what is happening. Because, buyers have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things going on, and you're kind of coming in for like a very particular part of their whole operations. So I think that's it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of has a dual enabling factor, both for the buyer and for the sellers to be able to wrap their head around like
Totally.
why do you have the right to sell something or to buy something.
Yeah, were you on my calls yesterday? I literally just had this conversation with
I
somebody
was sneaking in.
and they were like, "Hi, I'm in your school." They were like, "Well, I don't want to ask so many questions on this first call because I feel like they're here like expecting to learn something, and I
Yeah,
don't want to just spend the time asking all of my questions." And I was like, I invite you to like shift your perspective and think about the fact that you doing like this diagnostic kind of with them, which is what discovery is, and then summarizing and playing back to them
yeah,
like where they're at and what their challenges really are is really important. It's like being a therapist, and like you have the perspective of just being able to come in and like give them all of your attention and really listen,
yeah,
and then kind of help them to tell that story for themselves, which they don't have time to do in their day,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Becomes super important for especially for larger deals, right? It's not if it's transactional, you might not have a full 45-minute meeting to
Yeah.
like do discovery, but the second the sales motion takes, a few weeks, a few months, and I think it'll actually jeopardize your deal if you don't take that time.
A
Um,
100%.
Cool. Well, Monica, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really enjoyed the insights, the perspective, the very kind of hands-on. Like I mentioned earlier, I think it's very insightful for me as well. I'm in both seats. I'm a founder myself, scaling my organization, but also working with organizations who are looking to scale their organization. So I think it was super insightful. Lots of very good nuggets of insights and tips and tricks. Maybe as a closing question, where can people find you or follow you? I know that you do a lot of cool content on on LinkedIn, and you work with a lot of cool companies at MSP Consulting. So where can people find you and follow you?
Find me on LinkedIn, just Monica Stewart on LinkedIn. I post there almost every day about a lot of the things that we talked about today.
Oh yeah, awesome. I'm Patrick Monnot. I'm the founder and the CEO of Pod. See you next time.
Thank you so much.